Welcome everyone to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And today we're going to talk about some real nitty gritty sales communication strategies with a real master of the art, somebody who's taken these ideas and simplified them in a way that I think you're going to find very refreshing. So we're going to talk to superstar Adrian Miller, who has been working with businesses in B2B selling for a number of decades and just brings a depth of experience and a fresh perspective to take things that seem very complicated. You may be thinking, gee, has the world changed that much? And she has a real ability to bring it down to ground level, make it something memorable, and I think you're going to learn at least a few very powerful nuggets just on this podcast episode right now. So without further ado, let's welcome Adrian Miller to our show. Well, welcome, Adrian, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, Adrian, I think one thing that's very helpful for our listeners is just for you, in your own words, tell us, who do you serve primarily and what do you do for them?
Okay, thanks. So I am a sales consultant and trainer and content developer. And I mention all three because they all are very much intertwined. My clients run the gamut, but I would say my major sweet spot are small. And when I say small, I might mean solopreneurs. They may be startups, but they may be in business for a very lengthy period of time, but have always done it by and for themselves, sometimes with outside resources that they bring in for things, but they're solopreneurs. To mid-sized companies, and I'm going to define mid-sized companies up to about 250 employees. I know there are people who define them at much smaller, and I also know I've made a mistake with a very, very large company who defines their mid-sized clients as clients that generate 500 million to 1 billion in revenue.
I've worked for that client.
and over a billion is larger. And I just looked at them with my mouth kind of open.
Right.
I go, oh, that's bigger than my mid-sized client. Many zeros more.
That's funny. It's all about perspective, right? And a lot of multinationals or big software companies will define that their SMB category is that half a billion and above.
Yeah.
Hey, that's not SMB. That's a big company.
In my world, for sure.
Yeah, no, likewise. I totally get it. Wow. So when you talk, so again, sales, and I love the term sales consultant and trainer. So there's an idea of sales training is like, okay, we have a package methodology and we come in, there's a lot of big companies that do that, whether it's Sandler, Richardson, Millerheimer, all credible platforms. But sales consultant. So help me understand that a little bit for our listeners, just that distinction between being a sales consultant and being a sales trainer. I know you do both, but just want to focus on that.
Sure. Sales consulting for me, and I find it is a service we provide that is very, very in favor with these smaller companies, who many are kind of homegrown. The people who have are in the company have worked there for a very long time, and their outside perspective of business development, sales processes, procedures, lead generation sometimes needs a new set of eyes. The other thing is some of these companies have grown spectacularly, and it's awesome. But they've reached a point and they can't seem to push themselves up anymore. They don't have any processes. They've grown, God bless them, in all sorts of ways, but now they need to have a little bit more of a game plan of what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. So I'll take a deep dive with them into the business and look at all the other departments as well. Look at all the other functional areas that they're working on if there are not formal departments, because in small companies there often aren't formal departments. And we will do situation analysis and then lay out best practices for how they can move forward. And in the best of all worlds, I'll be around for a while, helping guide them through that change, if it in fact is a change, or through that enhancement, if they already have something in place. Training is training is training. I provide customized training. I've never used other people's training models. Everybody has their pros and cons for all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I customize it, I really pay attention to what they're selling, to whom, where are these prospects and clients, who are their competition, and really create a cogent training program, because I've investigated and done a very deep dive into who they are, what they do, etc. The content is interesting because we need to have sales materials. We need to have marketing materials. We need to have social media. We need to be visible, recognizable, credible. And many of the smaller companies in particular don't have an in-house marketing person. They don't have a writer on staff. Sure, the big companies do. I get it. But the small companies don't. And they're not quite sure where to go. And sometimes they bring in outside resources, and those are great, but the outside resources don't marry what they're communicating with our processes and the model that we've created. And it's very dysfunctional. So I can create a much more integrated approach for them if they want it. I hope they do. But if they don't, if they have someone that is cognizant of what's going on in the sales world, then great. Stick with it if it works.
Well, let me comment on that briefly, because you hit a lot of chords that I could relate to and experience in the 15 years I've been as value prop, or working with many of the same kinds of companies that you described. When they try to get their marketing communications beefed up, their website, their collateral, and so on, they more often than not bring in somebody with a strong branding and almost always a B2C sensibility, because a lot of branding is taught academically. A lot of the art and design, it's all about everyone wants to be the next Nike, or they try to position it. And I'm saying, like, you sell a mixing machine or you sell a thing, it's not going to be the same kind of feel. So you just described the big disconnect between sales process, sales communications, and Marcom. And the Marcom people don't understand selling, because they want to create great designs, right? Things that look cool. And it's good to have things that look
And a
cool.
great tagline too. Great tagline.
Right. It's all looks good, but it doesn't move the dial. So you talked about about sales materials, and I just want to draw that distinction between what we broadly would think of as marketing materials and sales materials. So could you help our audience maybe think about, when she says sales materials, what does that mean? Does that mean a brochure? What does that mean, and how do I get it?
Yeah. So I am, well, obviously a sales letter, some sales communication with a prospect. We all know about that. Some of them really, pardon me, suck. They're just, I mean, I get them too. It's like, I shake my head. I go, you're kidding me. This is just terrible. And I don't forget about terrible writing. It's just terrible strategy. Every part of it isn't working. But I am the queen of touch point management. Yes, the queen of touch point management, because I believe that many people lose business because they let themselves fall off the grid. Like, you make contacts. We all work so hard to make these contacts. And we, back in the day when we used to go out, we used to go to networking things, and Chamber of Commerce and Rotaries and all these events and trade shows. And we're collecting cards left and right and scanning into my phone. I got this big database, blah, 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 blah. And then what? We send what? Hi, it was so great to meet you. And then what? I mean, it's almost the expectation that someone's going to buy from you, like, immediately. Has anyone ever heard of a long sales cycle? Has anyone ever heard that you may have to cultivate a prospect weeks, months, and freaking years? And how do you do that without being a pain in the proverbial butt? Because no one wants you to check in and touch base. Unless it's your mom, maybe your best friend or something like that. But pretty soon it gets to be totally boring, and it's a waste of your prospects' time. And even forget about prospects, it's also, if you have a referral source, it's a waste of their time. So it's always been my contention, and all sales communications have to do this. You have to add value to the relationship before there's a relationship. Value. And you can't check in. No one wants to hear from me that much. I mean, touching base is like, okay, what else do you have for me? Because it's all what about them, right? So there are three ways to do that. And your sales communications will circle around these three things because you can't just do them blindly. One, how awesome is it if you make introductions? Like if you have a prospect and then 2 months while you're wooing, because you're wooing, winning, and wowing. Okay, you're wooing someone, you're winning their business, and then you freaking wowing them, because if you don't wow them, you don't keep their business for very long anyway. So you make an introduction. You are my new best friend, because we all live by the people we meet. I mean, a good introduction to someone who's either a referral source, possibly a client at some point, or even if we share this awesome hobby. Like I take a lot of pictures. I'm a photographer and I travel a huge amount. So if you introduce me to someone who takes tons of pictures and travels, we're going to get on really famously, maybe even do business at some point, but I don't even care about that. We're going to talk. So introductions, information. We live in an information age, and it doesn't only have to be information about you. So when you're circling back with information, if your information is all about something you're doing or your business, really, oh my God, I think I'm pretty interesting, but I'm not that interesting. To every time I touch you, I have to tell you about me. I mean, really, I don't think that works. So information that might be relevant to their business life or their personal life. And then invitations. I think invitations are great because they are probably the easiest of all. We all get invited to podcasts and events and this and that. And especially in the era of COVID, if you wanted to, you could have been on a networking call an hour, 24 hours a day, because
Absolutely.
we were worldwide then, right?
Right.
So, somewhere in New Zealand, there are people doing networking, and don't we want to talk to them because they actually speak English? So you could go on that call. So invite people to things instead of deleting an invitation from your email. Just instead forward it to people. But when you do these things, you have to surround it with content, because you're reminding them of your existence. And so in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a PS, a really wonderful PS, I added this great blog to my website, thought this might be important to you because I reference the top 4 tips on how people can blah, blah, blah. Because we're being, we can't be selfish and right in their face, look at me, look at me, look at me, but you certainly can tangentially put it in there. So staying in contact, being on their radar screen. Um, you know, people aren't mailing things these days, they're emailing things. So what does your sales content look at? I'm a big believer in visuals. I'm a big believer in video. I'm a big believer in whiteboard animations. And I'm the biggest believer in making someone smile, making them laugh, because they will remember you much more. Remember, you're planting seeds, creating recognition, and ultimately you want them to say, tell me more about how you. That's the best thing. Okay. And you can move people to that point even if they're a cold contact. They're not going to say that necessarily on the first touch. Maybe 1%, 1/2 of 1%, 1/4 of 1% will. But for most B2B, it takes a little bit of cultivation to get people to do that. So you have to stay there. It's like you can't give up. but you also can't be a pain in the butt. You have to add value, and you can't have your sales funnel so empty that you're constantly going back to the same person
Right.
because you don't have enough in there. So it's
Right.
a little bit of an intricate dance, right? It's staying on the grid, but still adding new people, staying visible, doing personal branding, all of that stuff. And by the way, without a total apologies to the branding people and to the word branding. I kind of predate branding. We didn't call it branding. I don't know. Branding was something you did on on a cow's backside. Branding, branding, branding. It used to be reputation. Who are you? What do you stand for? What do people say about you when you're not in the room? And that's what I use. Okay. I don't want to get caught into branding this, but for me, the only time I use branding is I work with a lot of people on their personal brand because they work for companies, but they need to be out in the marketplace standing for who they are. Okay. They can never undermine what the company brand or mission is because that would look kind of weird, but they need to take a portion of their their inner person and start to put that out there too, because we all buy from people.
And that's how they add value, right? So whatever the company platform is, their personal, this is why you're talking to me, because
Exactly.
I've sometimes told teams, I said, look, if your company could replace you with a robot, they would, but they can't because they need, and maybe one day they will, but right now they can't, and they still need people to connect at a human level. And Adrian, you mentioned something here. Two things I just wanted to loop back because I think they were very interesting. One is the idea of you can't be a pain. So I often get into this conversation. People have strong opinions and not necessarily grounded in facts on the issue of frequency.
Uh-huh.
Like how frequent is too frequent
Right.
contact, right? So yeah, somebody says, "Well, I don't want to be that like those spammers. So I
Right.
only send an email once a quarter to
Yeah.
my list, right?"
Yeah.
So I'm saying, "Well, why bother?" At that
Yeah.
point
Right.
because
Who
they don't know.
remembers you?
But and there are others who maybe follow some of like the people who sell like guru packages, the learning packages that don't they burn through their list. They don't mind, and
Right.
they'll just hit
Right.
you, eight
Right.
times a week. What
Totally.
in your experience in a typical B2B professional
Yep.
setting,
Yep.
what is an appropriate cadence?
Okay. So first, I'll step back. For me, if you're adding value on your touch, I don't think people will call you a pain in the butt. If I've wrote to you last week, but all of a sudden you get an email from me this week, and I am making an introduction for you to somebody who could add value. It's like, are you going to say, "Gee, I wish you wouldn't write to me"?
No, could you do it? Could you do it tomorrow?
Yeah, or later today I'm free. I need another email from you. I mean, if I share really important information about your competitor, or I point out an article that was in an obscure publication, or I invite you to something that you didn't know about, but you're going, heck, I want to go to this. This sounds fabulous. This is exactly my marketplace. I did that yesterday with someone who said, "Oh man, thank you. I didn't know about this. And this is exactly who I am trying to meet."
Mm,
I mean, they're never,
wow.
if I emailed them an hour later, they would happily open my email. Exactly. So, I mean, it depends. It depends on all the due diligence you've done, and why you think they're a great prospect. I'll give you an idea. One of my best clients I won after 36 touches. But I knew so much about them. I really took the time to not only learn about the company, but it was a big company, learn about this regional president and all the information I was able to gather through LinkedIn, through Google, through Hoover's, through everything else, and where they were at in their business arc and what problems they seemed to be having, and everything I could glean. I really thought I could help. I really, really did. And so I went through my song and dance, and and of course I did all the do I know an influencer there, da, da, and I went through the whole song and dance, and I did a combination of email and a combination of newsletter and a combination of connecting on social media and phone. The thing most people, salespeople hate more than anything else in the entire world. And if they never had to talk on the phone again, they'd be happy. If you can get someone to give you a lead and then you just have to go in and woo them and take them out to lunch or go to drinks or have a Zoom now, they're happy. But the fact is that really, as a steady diet, isn't going to work. You have to intersperse the phone at some point or other, even if you leave an incredible voicemail, in your tone, in your manner, in your voice, in your enthusiasm, and you just don't sound like a boring drone. So the answer to that question, I wish I could say it's every week. I wish I could say it's every 2 weeks. I think if you add value, you can always err on the side of being more frequent. If you can't figure out how to use the 3 I's or come up with something that someone would say, Shazam, I'm so glad they reached out to me. Maybe once a quarter is too much, frankly.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think anyone could get annoyed if you touch every 2 to 4 weeks. I know some salespeople kind of hit on 3 weeks and they like that. But the worst thing to have happen, is to be going through this wooing process and what you consider the wooing process, and to wait so long that someone else won the business, because our prospects don't go to sleep at night with our name on a Post-it under their pillow and wake up in the morning and go, Adrian Miller, yay!
Yeah.
Remembering her. Our prospects, they may be very, very important to us, but we haven't gotten very important to them. We get important with the 3 I's,
Right.
but they got a lot of things on their plate. Oh, so the guy I spoke to after the 36 touches, which, by the way, took me about 8 months. I left voicemails, I sent emails, I did all the stuff. On my 36th call, he picked up his phone, and I think I said, hey, it's Adrian Miller, but if you have caller ID, I think you probably know that already. And he laughed and he said, can you come in to see me Tuesday at 2:00? I didn't even open my calendar. I don't care. I remember I didn't care if I was supposed to be anywhere else in the world. My answer was absolutely. Should I come to the address on your website? And it was like, what happened was he had 8 months worth of priorities. We think we're a priority. They may not. I know salespeople like to say this, you can make yourself a priority. Yes. Now, when you're talking to a regional president who's
Right,
juggling P&L and got 200 employees and doing this, that, and the other, and yeah, he knows he needs to scale up, he needs to do this, but we're a little bit self-absorbed if we think it's all they're thinking about.
Well, it's like the priority grid, right? There's urgent and there's important. And there's a moment in time where there's other things that are more urgent. Not that you're not important, but there are other things that are just more urgent. So Adrian, just because we're right about at our time, and thank you so much for sharing these incredible nuggets. I just want to recap quickly. You add value through introductions, through information, and invitations. The 3 I's. Love it. All right, that's great. And the other one that really just rang a bell is the 3 stages you're kind of in. And I know we really highlight, 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
Wooing, winning, and wowing. So, and I immediately thought about, I've been married almost 32 years, right? So it was a wooing and winning. I'm still working on the wowing. So we'll see if I figure that out.
It's though, I mean, I'm a simple person, and I really like to, and I do this a lot in training. I like to make it memorable, easy to remember, and kind of, fun, so you'll do it. I can't get too ponderous. We are not talking, this isn't quantum physics. We didn't just shoot Jeff Bezos into space,
That's right.
design the algorithm for that or whatever, anything else. It's simple with people talking to people. You have a product or service, you have people who need, and we have to get them from needing it to wanting it. Need is easy. Need is so easy. If I don't ever need another pair of shoes, mostly because this whole year I was barefoot. But seriously, want. We got to move people to want what we have. They may know they need it. That still doesn't mean they're going to buy it or buy it now.
That's wonderful. I really appreciate that, Adrian.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And so if somebody listening to this really excellent episode of our podcast, Adrian, they want to know more about you, how to reach you, where should they go?
So I have 4 websites. AdrianMiller.com is probably the easiest. ADRIAN, AdrianMiller.com. On LinkedIn, I don't even know what my LinkedIn profile is. I think it's Adrian Miller Sales Training. That's a great place because I check my LinkedIn a lot. I write a lot of content, and you get to see a lot of what I write. You get to see a lot of people who are connected to me. If you connect with me, you may see people who are connected to me you want to be connected with. That's what LinkedIn's about. I'm happy to connect you. And relationships can start from there. That's what LinkedIn's for. It's a relationship tool. Don't sell direct on it because the people who do that have very nasty names attached to them. But build relationships, and we get off the platform as quickly as we're on it. And then let's talk.
What a radical idea.
Absolutely.
So we'll have all those links on our show notes, but for those listening, the simplest, AdrianMiller.com. Yep. Adrian Miller, thank you so much for sharing with our audience on today's episode.
One last thing, one last thing. For those who really want some very succinct and real speak sales tips, free download of my book, theblatanttruth.com. You just go there. There's the free download. It really is a fun read. You don't have to read it all, because if you decide that tip number 1 is really the most relevant to you, that's cool. Just stick with tip 1. Why would you read more?
Simple. I love it, Adrian. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much.